Today's tutorial is going to be a continuation about our inventory. So this time we're gonna have objects which have the name or the ID along with the amount, and we're gonna have an ability to grab the object and add it to our inventory. Looking at our inventory class, we're going to be modifying the last step, which is game world, and the mechanic we're going to be adding is adding objects into the inventory from world space to inventory space. In order to do this, we're going to modify our database property, which we will add one more parameter, which is the prefab. So we're going to be able to load and unload using this property, and we're also going to be creating another property called the item property, which we're going to add into our object, and we're going to define its ID and amount and go from there. So in our world, we can see that the database property has been updated to include the prefab in its list. Now, before we can do that, we actually have to modify our objects, to which we add the item property inside, and it has its own ID and amount. Give each object its ID and whatever amount you want, but for the ID, it has to be prioritized as the list number in the database property, so they must match. Now, once we're done with that, to make it into a node, it's very simple. A prefab, just click and drag it into the asset browser, thus creating the prefab, and you can go inside the edit and you can see that our changes have been saved inside. Once we are done with that, then we can just click and drag them inside our database. Nothing too hard. One final step for modifications, we're going to add a new function into our database controller, which allows us to actually modify the values. I have included both C++ and C# for references. The next one is we create a class called Inventory Interactor, which allows us to interact and parse the object itself. Now, the basics are that we have a constructor that takes in from our inventory controller. We got a bool that detects the item, so we can return it, so we do detect it. Then a get item to give us the value, and all helper variables that help us make this happen. One final step is actually we're going to modify the inventory controller to hold all the logic. So inside our inventory controller, we're going to add the interactor, and then afterwards we're also going to add the logic inside it. First is the initialization, just allows us to construct it. Then if we press the button, in our case R, we get the item, and we have detect item that's just running all over the time, and shutdown is shutdown. Nothing too complicated. So inside the inventory interactor, we got a few things that we add. So we're gonna go through it one by one. The first thing is in the constructor, we're just gonna initialize stuff. Nothing too fancy, just basic labels and basic objects. The label is just for visualization. The Boolean detect item actually has the most logic, or all of it. First is the cam view direction between the camera and the world. Then is an intersection, which basically allows us to get items between two lines and casts a ray between it, and we get an object, the closest object between this line compared to what we are looking at. After that, if the item exists and it's not one of our preset items, we're gonna get the property from inside it, and we're gonna update the label to include whatever we like. In this case is this. And then after that, we're done with updating the label. Then we are going to return true. And that is the end of that frame. But if we don't find anything, we just empty it and return false. Get item just checks if we have the item in that one frame second. If we do, we return it. And if we don't, we return a 0, which basically just, defaults it up around there. And the last thing is the shutdown, which just shuts down, deletes everything, makes sure that it's safe to delete. That's all inside our function. Now, as you can see, the final product is that when we hover over an object, an item, that there is a name on top and the amount on the bottom that we have placed. And then as we can look into our inventory, the moment we grab it with R, it is now in our inventory and the object has been deleted from world space. All right, so with that, we have everything we need for our addition. The next thing we're gonna do is we are going to do the reverse, which is place an object in world from our inventory. Now we can do it in different ways, but I think the easiest way is just to throw it out. But until then, I will see you guys next time.